All right, it's Monday here on the Morning Pitt on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Chris Peak from Panther-Lair.com, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. You know the website, most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet, football, basketball, and recruiting. It's all right there, Panther-Lair.com. And you know the other thing I always say, the message boards where you can interact with hundreds and thousands of other Pitt fans. All day, every day, Pitt fans are talking and interacting. Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. So if you're a Pitt fan, you want to talk to other Pitt fans, the place to do it is right there. Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. This below me, that's not a link. Don't click it. That's just an image. But if you type it into your search bar up there, you can go to the website and check out all the coverage we have from Pitt Spring Camp, coverage of recruiting. Pitt just got another commitment yesterday. We're going to have some news on that today, I think. And, of course, all the basketball coverage as Jeff Capel moves through the transfer portal. And actually, we've got a Morning Pitt planned for later this week. We're going to talk about that in the latest developments in the transfer portal as it relates to Pitt. Of course, our YouTube channel here, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Like this video and subscribe. You know, the like button's right over there. The subscribe button is right down there. You click that, you turn on your notifications, you'll get an alert sent to your phone every time we post a new video right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. You also get an alert when we go live for our weekly live stream every Wednesday night at 8:30 p.m. right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. We jump on here and talk for an hour. There's a chat screen right over here, a comment section. You post your comments. We read it and go back and forth, have a little conversation every Wednesday night about Pitt football, basketball, and recruiting right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Of course, this is a busy time of year, not just because of the transfer portal, although that's certainly taking up a lot of time, and football recruiting, which has been more active than ever in the month of March, more active than I can ever remember in the month of March. It's certainly been humming along right now for Pat Narduzzi and his staff, but it's spring camp, and that's always a very busy time of year. Last week they had four practices really. They practiced Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Most weeks they practice Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. They'll practice this Saturday, but not next Saturday due to Easter weekend. But you know, they're keeping it busy, and certainly we're busy covering all the practices. You can see the slideshow here. We've got the videos and the coverage and the interviews and the quotes and all that stuff. But they're 2 weeks into camp. They've had 7 practices now, by my count. 3 the first week and 4 this last week. So almost halfway through the 15 practices. And really, if you think of spring camp, or the spring game being practice number 15, you know, and so if you think of it as 14 practices leading into the spring game, they're halfway through, which is kind of remarkable. It doesn't feel like we're that far into camp, but at least in terms of the number of practices, we're halfway through. So I thought we could kind of reset the conversation here. I know we talked before spring camp started 2 weeks ago. You know, it was the day of the Mississippi State game. It was the day of the playing game. We talked about what to expect and what we were looking for and what we were, what were the big questions and all that kind of thing, the big storylines heading into spring camp. But I thought today we could kind of reset a little bit and talk about what we've learned over the first 2 weeks. Now, keep in mind, everything we talk about is based, I shouldn't say that. Keep in mind that the media can watch roughly the first half hour to 40 minutes or so of each practice, which consists, to varying degrees of stretching, punting, occasionally field goal kicking, although I don't think we've seen any field goal kicking so far this spring, and then individual drills. There's very rarely anything that constitutes real football. Offense and defense are never on the field together, facing each other in any meaningful way. And, occasionally you'll see a football thrown from one player to another intentionally on a pass route of some kind. That's about as developed, as you'll see. Now, of course, in addition to what we observe at camp, and there are actually, I talk about those things sort of jokingly, downplaying what we actually see, and some of it's a little bit silly. There's, stretching is stretching. But there are things you can see, you can observe, and sort of conclusions we can draw or observations we can make based on that open practice window. But at the same time, there are also people to talk to. You can talk to various people around the program, people who watch more of practice than just the stretching, and get some feedback there. So that kind of informs our opinions and what we think of the team and what we think of spring camp so far. So when you look at these first 2 weeks, what are some of the things that have stood out? What are some of the things that we've really noticed? And the first thing is the quarterbacks. I'm not going to sit here. I spent all of last offseason talking about how good I thought Kedon Slovis was going to be based on his time at USC. It obviously, his time at Pitt did not mirror that time at USC, obviously. And while I don't think Pitt's offensive issues were entirely on Slovis and entirely his fault, he certainly bears a lot of the responsibility for it, and he takes a lot of the blame, and rightfully so. But my point is this. I spent a lot of last offseason talking about how high the expectation should be for Pitt based on how high the expectation should be for the offense, based on how high the expectation should be for Kedon Slovis, based on how he played previously in his career. I'm not going to do that this year. At least I don't think I am. I don't intend to do that this year. Talk about the reasons it could work and the reasons it might not, but I'm not going to put as much stock into it as I did a year ago. So what I'll tell you about the quarterbacks is this. And what I've seen from the quarterbacks and what I've heard about the quarterbacks is this. There's no question about the arm talent. And if you've been reading Panther-Lair.com, if you've been reading the practice reports and all the different things that I've been writing after each of these practices that we've been able to attend, I've talked about this. I've said it a bunch of times. I mean, and it's undeniable. And I'm not the only one who's noticed it. The coaches have mentioned it on and off the record. People who watch practice have mentioned it on and off the record. I mean, it's very clear. Like, Phil Dracovic can really throw the ball. Christian Veilleux can really throw the ball. Ty Diefenbach's got a decent arm. Nate Yarnell's not a bad passer. I mean, this is a really good collection of quarterbacks in terms of just the very basic and pure ability to throw the ball. Passers. As pure passers, these guys are really good. Christian Veilleux can sling it. And words like beautiful and pretty get thrown around a lot, talking about him and the way he throws the ball. He's just got that kind of arm talent. And I don't know if arm talent is, it feels to me like arm talent as a phrase and as a trait nomenclature has developed a lot in the past 5 years or so. That guy's got real arm talent. I mean, it's something that online, self-appointed draft experts like to say as a different way of saying, boy, he throws the ball really well. He's got considerable arm. He's got plus arm talent. When they talk about their hips or flexibility or, these different terms that do have some basis in scouting and evaluation, but ultimately get kind of reappropriated and overused by the cottage industry of online draft experts, arm talent. But all that being said, this group has a whole heck of a lot of arm talent. I mean, Veilleux might be the best pure passer of the group, just of the drills that I've watched. I mean, I'm not saying that every pass is right on the mark, but it looks really, really pretty coming out of his hands. I mean, he is a really good passer. And Phil Dracovic is no slouch himself. I mean, these guys can really throw the ball. And so I don't know how they're going to do operating the offense. I don't know how they're going to do, in the middle of a game. I don't know how they're going to do about this or that, but they can throw it. They're also athletic. This is one of the more athletic quarterback groups that I've seen in a while. Pitt's had athletic quarterbacks, obviously. Nick Patty can move around a little bit. Kenny Pickett could run. Chad Voitic could run. He could move around. Obviously, you get back to, a Tyler Palco era, and I'm not comparing these guys to any of those guys, but all of these guys can move a little bit. Dracovic can move. Veilleux can run. Diefenbach has some moves and some athleticism. Nate Yarnell, I think, can move a little bit, probably more than we really got to see in the Western Michigan game. So it's one of the more athletic quarterback rooms that I've seen at Pitt in a while, and in terms of arm talent, it's about as good as I've seen at Pitt in a while. Now, again, I'm not going to go too far down the road of proclaiming these guys to be the greatest and saying that the offense is going to be great as a result. But they've got a lot of the physical traits that you like to see. Whether they can put it all together and operate the offense and score a bunch of points and win a bunch of games, I don't know. That remains to be seen. But they've got a lot of the physical traits down, which is a heck of a good place to start. You'd rather start with that than not. You know what I mean? You'd rather, if you're going to start somewhere, you'd rather have that than not have that. So they got that going for them, which is nice. Beyond that, we'll see. Then there's the question of the guys they're throwing to, and I'm a little less bullish on this group. I hope these receivers prove me wrong. I hope these receivers know that they're being doubted. Wide receivers love to be doubted. Wide receivers love to be counted out and left all alone, and nobody wanted to be with them when they were down, and all this stuff. And I hope they do prove everyone wrong. I think Konate Mumpfield could be really good. I've been bullish on him for a long time, really high on that on him and his ability for a long, since Pitt got him last year. And I thought he would be really good. He wasn't. And I think there are a lot of reasons for why he didn't produce at the level that he produced at Akron, why he didn't produce at the level that he was expected to produce at this past year. I think part of it was usage. I've written a lot about this on Panther-Lair.com, and I'll continue to write a lot about this on Panther-Lair.com, that his usage at Akron was different from how he was used at Pitt, and maybe he could be more effective if he was used more the way he was used at Akron in terms of depth of target largely, that he was more of a middle distance receiver at Akron than he was at Pitt, where he was getting a lot of short passes. Not that he can't make plays on those short passes, but, I think you could find better usage for him, and maybe his production and overall impact would improve if he was used a little bit better. I think Bub Means is who he is. He's a tall, athletic receiver, goes down the field, and you just give him a chance to try and make a play. I think Dejon Reynolds, as a transfer from Florida, is a pretty intriguing guy. He's sort of stocky. He's not, and I don't mean that he's like fat or something. I just mean he's thick. He's physical. He's well built. Maybe almost as a possession type of guy. I mean, someone who is mid-range or middle distance making tough catches. That's kind of what he looks like. But then beyond that, you've got a bunch of guys who haven't played at all. Either because they're freshmen or because they are, they've been around for a year or two and they just haven't gotten on the field. Miles Alston seems to be having a nice camp, so maybe he's going to have an opportunity. Lamar Seymour as a freshman and Izzy Polk as a freshman are doing nice things for freshmen, but are they going to be able to play at a high enough level to get on the field as freshmen? So some of the freshmen are going to have to play, whether it's Seymour or Polk or Kenny Johnson or Zion Fowler. One of those guys, if not more, is going to be on the field enough to burn his red shirt. I'm very confident of this. Whether they're able to actually make an impact, though, is that could be a tall order. It's hard to play as a freshman. Only the best, are really able to contribute at a high level as a freshman. Jordan Addison, Tyler Boyd. I mean, these are the types of receivers who can play at a high level as a freshman, and even guys who became pretty productive and became really good. I mean, Jared Wayne didn't do that. He played as a freshman. He didn't redshirt, but it's not like he was the team's leading receiver or even anything close to it. So it's not easy to play at that level in your first year, but some of these guys are going to have to contribute. It feels to me like a group, the receivers as a whole, that a group that doesn't have a lot of depth, certainly doesn't have a lot of experience depth, and I'm not sure that it has that number one guy. If Mumpfield is that number one guy, and I think he might have the potential to be that, I mean, he hasn't done it yet. And so those guys have a lot to prove, and they're going to have plenty of doubters to prove wrong, which, again, wide receivers love to do. As far as the offensive line, and I'm not going to hit on every position here, but just kind of bouncing around to a few that have been particularly notable to me this spring. I think it's a strong group with a lot of experience. I mean, the starting five of left to right, Branson Taylor, Ryan Jacoby, Jake Cradle, Blake Zubovic, Matt Gonsalves, those guys have played a lot of games and made a bunch of starts. I mean, Gonsalves started every game last year. So did Cradle. Zubovic played a bunch last year and the year before. Jacoby played a bunch last year. Most of it was at tight end. Very little of it was actually at offensive line, but he was on the field a lot, and I think there's high expectations for what he's going to be able to do. And then Taylor, was in the starting lineup a pretty decent amount last season, not every game, but with injuries to Carter Warren and Gabe Hoy, he was out there a whole lot. Then you have number 70 there. Ryan Baer is sort of your first tackle off the bench, your swing tackle, probably to fill in at either spot. You need to fill in some depth in the interior line spots, Terrence Enos or Terrence Moore. or Jason Collier probably would fit into those roles there. But that top 5, I think you feel pretty good about that group. You should. And you should be able to. And I think those guys should be expected to play at a pretty high level this year. So it's, because they've done it before and done it well and, had success. So staying healthy is always going to be key there. But it's it's a good starting point, where I think it's funny, and I've said this before. I think 2023 was viewed as a year. It was, a couple years ago, or even a year ago, when all those offensive linemen came back for 2022, and Carter Warren and Gabe Hoy and Marcus Minor and Owen Drexel all announced they were coming back. There was the initial reaction was, wow, that's great. They're going to have all these offensive linemen back. They're going to have a really good offensive line. But then there was also sort of a counter of, well, they're also kind of kicking the can down the road on when that changeover is going to happen, when that transition is going to happen. And 2023 was then going to have to be the year where the transition happened. Well, it has. It's just they've transitioned to guys who played a lot last year due to the injuries. You know what I mean? Where Gabe Hoy misses time, Carter Warren misses time, Owen Drexel misses time. And that opened the door for all of those guys. All those returners in 2022 never actually played a snap together. All those guys who came back, Hoy, Warren, Drexel, and Minor, never actually got on the field together. But that opened the door for everybody who's playing this year to get a lot of experience. So that when that transition came, it wasn't quite as abrupt. And you're bringing in a returning starter here and a returning starter there and a returning starter, conceivably 4 returning starters, if you want to count Zubovic, at least 3 returning starters if you have Cradle, Gonçalves, and Taylor, and then another, all of them played. So you're in a pretty good spot there, I think, with how that group is coming together. Now, again, they're going to have to stay healthy. Maybe if there's always an equal and opposite reaction, maybe the injuries that they had last year, which they had a lot, quite a few injuries along the offensive line. I mean, 3 projected starters out for extended periods of time. And maybe that, maybe there's a balance this year. Maybe it evens out a little bit this year, and they don't, maybe they can stay a little healthier on the offensive line and keep Gonçalves and Cradle and Zubovic and Jacoby and Taylor out there a lot. Pretty intrigued to see Ryan Baer, though. Pretty intrigued to see what he's able to do. Stepping into a role as a prominent role as, like I say, the top tackle off the bench, probably at both spots. And he's probably good enough that he could play guard as well. Now, has he learned all those spots? I mean, you probably want to focus in on just getting one job, having him master one position. But he's talented enough. I mean, he could fight his way onto the field. I'll say that. He could fight his way onto the field and push a Taylor or a Jacoby, I think, for one of those spots on the left side of the line. Because I think he's just that good and his future is just that bright. All right, I ended up talking about the offense a lot longer than I thought, so I think this whole camp observations thing, what did we learn so far, might have to be split into 2. Do one video about the offense, one about the defense. So maybe we'll have to do the defense later in the week. I mean, on the whole, with Pitt's offense, I mean, it's of course going to come down to the quarterbacks. I guess I didn't talk about the running backs, but I mean, you got Rodney Hammond, Sebo Flemister. I think you know what you have in those guys. You have to like what you saw out of Flemister at the end of the season, as being pretty promising for what he might be able to do in a more prominent role as the backup this year. I think Derek Davis has impressed some people. Former Gateway kid, transferred here from LSU, projected as a defensive player coming out of high school, now playing running back. I think he's going to be in the mix there as the number 3 back. Daniel Carter will get some play. And then you'll see if the freshman, either TJ Harvison, who's here, or Montravius Lloyd, who's coming in the fall, or in the summer, excuse me. You see if those guys kind of get in the mix. But, I mean, this is really going to come down to Rodney Hammond staying healthy and Sebo Flemister being a quality backup and Derek Davis being quality backup. Those guys will, I think they'll be able to run the ball. I think this offensive line will be able to block for the run. I think they have talented backs and certainly a commitment in the scheme to running the ball. I'm not really worried about them being able to establish a ground game. It's really about the quarterbacks and the receivers being able to link up and get it going in the pass game. I mean, that's what doomed them last year in the games that they lost. and it's what will determine how far they go again this year. So that'll be a question of how that talent, that physical talent in the quarterback spot, how it manifests on the field in the games when they actually start playing. So that's kind of the overview of what we've learned so far. I'm sure we'll do a couple more of these over the course of the spring and certainly after the end of spring camp. And we'll do defense later in the week. I have a couple things that we're going to talk about on different episodes this week of the Morning Pitt. But we'll do a what we learned about the defense so far video maybe tomorrow or Wednesday. We'll see how the timing works out or if any other news comes up. But for now, we'll call that a day here. Appreciate you tuning in on the Morning Pitt. It's been fun to catch up with you here to start a Monday. Hope you had a great weekend. Make sure you like this video. Click the like button, subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, and then check out the website, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. Like I say, I hope you had a great weekend. Appreciate you tuning in this morning. Have a great Monday, and we'll be back again to talk to you tomorrow morning on the Morning Pitt, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.